I
Good morning, y'all.
I try to get here on time, and I'm coming from my other show, Bible Every Morning. Every Friday, I come from another show.
We all know that you are super busy and you are a big celebrity, and we know your schedule is full all the time. You got shows here and there, you got people to see. It's fine. It's all good. You know, we're not
Don't don't talk me up too much. Don't make more out of me than I
we're
really.
not to your status yet, but that's okay.
Oh, yeah, I'm creating a lot of stuff. Is it all busy work, or is there a purpose to it?
Well, there's always a purpose to it.
Well, Mom's here, Bonnie Creighton. Good morning, you two. Hi, Mom. Okay, so my ulterior motive in doing all of this is to get to hang out with my mom every day, pretty much.
And I bet she loves that.
Well, so normally we have a video and a topic. Do we have a topic today? I,
Yes, it's the Nord Stream pipeline uh, recent detonations to figure out who caused the leak.
hmm. So I did have a conversation with somebody about that this morning on another show that I do.
Mm.
So Doug, the tall guy, Doug TeNapel, and you know who that is? Do you know who Doug
Yeah,
TeNapel is?
yeah.
Okay, and he and I do a Friday morning show, and I say that here. I know I've said that before. We do a Friday morning show, and usually Q is with us. Quentin from Out of the Darkness. He wasn't able to make it this morning. He was on an airplane, but we covered this topic, and so it'll be on Rumble. It'll be posted on Rumble shortly, sometime today. Those of you who want to hear Doug's take on it, and he had a really kind of boiled it down, and he was saying some things like, "Okay, that kind of makes sense." I hope I can remember what he said here. I know you have a lawnmower outside, so you muted your mic or something. But
Yeah, sorry. My apartment complex does lawn care every Friday, so
yeah, so bad timing for the show. um, so this pipeline. Now I ran through something that the Gateway Pundit put up, and the Gateway Pundit did a pretty good kind of overview assessment based on what any detective uh, and any police officer should do when they detect a crime. So first of all, was this a crime? Was it an act of nature? Was it an act of God? Or was it sabotage? Well, the UN has determined, officially declared, that it was an act of sabotage, the United Nations. So it almost doesn't matter if it wasn't, right? It almost doesn't matter if in the end it comes out there was some earthquake that broke this thing in 4 places. It doesn't matter if the UN has declared it was sabotage, it will go down in the history books as sabotage, and now it's who was responsible. So
right,
what the Gateway Pundit did is you always look for what is it? Means, motive, and opportunity.
right.
Right? Means, motive, and opportunity. So narrowing down who would be responsible for it, what countries would fit. And so means there's a handful of countries that have the technical ability to go down and plant bombs down in, et cetera. So there was a list of like a handful, 5 or 6 of them. This is, but what about motive? And like three of the countries dropped right off. And then what about opportunity? And the list was down to 2, the United States and Russia. Right? It's like, so uh, it feels like it's something that the United States would do because not the United States, but the current administration. I have to make that distinction. I mean, even in the world, it doesn't make a difference if it's the leadership of the United States that does it, then it's the United States, period. And even though the people are against it, but Doug was making the argument. Well, the UN and Spain, I think, is the first to officially come out and say it was Russia that sabotaged their own pipeline. And it's like, that seems counterintuitive, but
Mm.
what's the argument? And Doug's argument for it actually being Russia rather than the United States, Doug's argument was they typically don't care about repercussions later. Like, that here, the argument I was making, just kind of trying to see why would Russia do something like this if it were. I know, absolutely understand why the United States would do it, at least the administration that is demonizing Russia, right? Our administration is demonizing Russia. And so, it makes sense that the United States would want to interrupt one of their power sources, right? This is a power source for them. They get a whole bunch of money by selling the fuel to Europe, right? Why would Russia cut off one of their main supply lines of funding? Like they make money off of selling power.
Right.
But what Doug was saying is, uh, you know, even within Russia, there are people arguing both sides. Like within Russia, we don't typically people just think of other countries as these monoliths, but within Russia, there are those saying, well, we have cut off Europe. We're going to starve them this winter to freeze them. But inside of Russia, like, you can't really do that. Let's turn it back on. Right. So as long
Mm.
as there's a valve a button that they can push that turns it on and off, it can be turned on instantly. But if you have the contingency within Russia that says, no, we don't ever want it turned back on, but
Mhm.
they don't have the power to stop it from being turned back on, they could resort to sabotage to make sure it's off and doesn't turn back. Because it'll be a year before they can fix it. Like an underwater pipeline takes a lot longer to fix than your average pipeline, and the projections are it take a year. So those are arguments for why Russia could have done it. I don't know. That's just a quick summary of a conversation I had with Doug this morning. Your take?
Yeah, so based on what I've heard and what I've read so far, uh, the, the first the first thing that's pretty clear is that we don't know
Yeah.
yet,
And we may
right?
never know.
And the thing is, another thing that has happened recently is that Russia, I'm not sure if they have already or if they're going to soon, to annex the portions of Ukraine that they've gone after.
Four regions in Ukraine.
Yeah, and I
That's
don't I don't
fine.
want to pronounce the name because I don't want to say them wrong, but I think they've already voted to annex them, or if they're going to soon. So my question is, if that was their goal the whole time, then haven't they succeeded? And if so, if you've succeeded in your goal, why would you sabotage a pipeline that you've already turned off? Because Russia already turned off the pipeline a while back ago. They've already gotten the whole EU by the cojones. They've already, you know, made all these NATO countries suffer because Russia is the single sole supplier of fuel and food. In my view, so far from what I've seen, I don't think Russia would physically sabotage a pipeline that they could use in the future. Because once they get their way, then they could turn the gas back on and then get the income again from the European countries they're selling fuel to. I do understand Doug's point. I get where he's coming from. And I do see how he's looking at history to support his argument. Okay. Russians act first, think later. Okay. That that's fair. that definitely is fair. Um, Another point too that I think is interesting is to consider the fact that it may not be Russia. It might just be a NATO country that caused this, a more powerful country within the EU that caused this. Because if you're truly trying to push this go green agenda, what better way than to legit destroy the supply of everything that is against the green? So I don't know.
I want to read Mitch's comment here. Mitch Nelson, if it wasn't for NATO expansion, despite existing agreements and treaties, none of this would be happening. But thank you, Mitch. Absolutely.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah, it's this. I think NATO isn't it obsolete? Right? NATO was formed because of the Soviet Union, right?
Yep.
It's like that was the whole point. Now there's no Soviet Union, so it's just like well, I live in California, and it reminds me of politicians that pass laws that based on current circumstances, thinking that will always be that way. The dot-com bubble, for example. California passes all these budget, like, oh, we're making all kinds of money off of Silicon Valley, these businesses just bringing so much revenue into our state. Let's pass laws to spend that money on this and that. And then when the bubble breaks, the laws are still in place. You're still obligated to spend all this money on stuff. You didn't say, well, let's roll it back since the money's not coming in. So
Right.
NATO is like that. Like, let's put it in place because current circumstances dictate that we need to have a NATO to stop the Soviet Union. And then the Soviet Union is over with, and NATO's like, we need to keep existing for
We
some
still need to be
reason.
relevant.
We need to keep existing for some reason. I know
Right.
what we can do. We can just get bigger, right? Let's
Right.
just get bigger and let's move eastward toward Russia. It's like, what the heck is going on? So it's power. It's a power grab. So something occurred to me as you're talking. It's like, what if there's a third option? It's not the United States, not Russia. Well, in this, and you were saying maybe it was a NATO nation. Well, what if it's, a what's the proper term? Um, I know there's a technical term, but uh, a non-state entity, right? What if there's some independent actor I mean, group that has the wherewithal to do something like this, to just cause havoc, to wreak havoc. I don't know. So I mean, I was pretty much in your camp, saying, it feels more like the United States would do something like this, but there are these international actors. I don't know. Occam's razor is a little bit difficult in this one, right?
Yeah.
What would Occam's razor be, right? What was
Right. Well, like what you mentioned before, keeping it simple, the means, the motive, and the
an
opportunity.
opportunity?
Yeah. It's like, well, everyone had the opportunity. No one didn't have the opportunity. Everyone has the opportunity. Okay. The means, well, that could vary. But let's be honest. What does it take to do that? Well, it just takes someone who has the ability to go underwater, supposedly, allegedly plant explosives, and that's it. It's not that hard to do. It doesn't take that much to do that. Third, the motive. That's the big thing. What's the reason for it? Again, for me, it's like Russia's already got NATO by the cojones. They've already got them. Like you're the majority of the Western European countries have already suffered, and the people are rising up to show their view of how much they've suffered. So it's like, I don't know. But one thing, too, is to understand the reasons as to why this happened in the first place, as to what Mitch said earlier. Um, there's a recent interview by Lex Friedman and Jordan Peterson. It's a really good interview.
Is that the guy's name? Because I've been referencing a Jordan Peterson interview. Let me look up Lex Friedman because that may be the guy.
It was a recent interview, and Dr. Turley did a bit over it. And Peterson,
Is Lex the guy that was like in Panama and then flew to the Netherlands? And let me see. Let me just look it up.
I don't know his backstory, but I know that in that interview, Peterson succinctly made 4 key points as to why Russia is doing what they're doing. And to be clear, he's not on either side. He's using the past to explain what's going on now. And one big thing that he mentioned was that Russia's, he mentioned that NATO's horrible management of post Soviet Russia was the main cause to all of this, as you mentioned before. Once the Soviet Union fell, NATO had to keep justifying their existence.
Yeah.
And so what happened later? Okay, well, then you have, say, the Gulf War in the 90s. Then you had the global war on terror, a 20-plus year conflict that definitely justified NATO's existence. But when that ended, after a botched withdrawal, all of a sudden, NATO's like, oh crap, what, we got to be involved in something. And all of a sudden, Ukraine conveniently starts pressing the idea, hey, let's join NATO. And Russia's like, no, no, we've told y'all, don't do that. We've been telling y'all, stop joining NATO because you guys are supposed to be that barrier between us and the EU. We've told y'all, stop doing this. And you keep doing it. And NATO and Ukraine basically did it. And NATO's like, and Russia was like, okay, fine. You've kept poking the tiger. Here's the response. Again, I'm not justifying what Russia has done, But what I will say is there's been a leading there's been leading things that have led up to this. That's my point. It wasn't just a off the wall thing.
Yeah, I looked up Lex Friedman. I recognize him. He's an MIT professor.
He's pretty
Actually,
young too.
he's a Russian-born MIT professor.
Yeah.
Professor, and I saw a piece. You know how they have a full interview and they'll put out 10-minute pieces where they talk about. So I did watch some of that. So I know you're talking about. There's another guy that I was thinking of. It was not the guy, but um, so in my research on something that I'm working on, right, this map behind me kind of tells. So this is real close to Russia. This is right below Russia. This is Turkey. So Russia's
Mhm.
up here, and Ukraine
Right.
is around here as well. Um, so there's a region right over here called well, there's Armenia,
Mhm.
and then there's Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is right here. Armenia is like right here.
Mhm.
And so there's a region in Azerbaijan called Nagorno Karabakh. The Armenians call it Artsakh. But it's like those regions in the Ukraine that are ethnically different than Azerbaijan, right? They are.
Right.
So these regions in the Ukraine, the four regions are Russian, right? They're ethnically
Mhm.
Russian, and the people that speak Russian, and there's two languages in the Ukraine, and some, it's like, so it's this very like we think of Ukraine because we're born and we grow up and there's a country called Ukraine, but the history is that place has had different borders throughout the centuries,
Right.
right? And that was all
Right.
part of Russia at one point and part
Yep.
of
It's
this
not
other
this
country at one
unified
point.
country. Right.
It's not right. It's not like the United States. The United States is 50 different regions as well, right? So it's like you
And
have
territories.
the United Ukraine has a bunch of different regions, right? If you think about it that way. And these regions are going, yeah, we don't like what's going on here in
Mhm.
our country. We like the way
Mhm.
it used to be or the way the Russians do it. And they're voluntarily welcoming the Russians in, right? And
Mhm.
so that's when this thing over in Azerbaijan and the Nagorno Karabakh, it's an Armenian region called Artsakh that's been Armenian for thousands of years, right? Thousands of years. But because Stalin in 1918 decides we're going to carve this up, we're going to call that Azerbaijan. We'll give this little piece over here to Armenia, and then Turkey got its own land by 1923. And then 2 years ago, Azerbaijan starts attacking this region of Armenians within their own territory. And so
Hmm.
this is different. Like Russia has gone to rescue the Russians in Ukraine. That's one way you can look at it. The
Sure.
Russians are over there to help. Like they want to be on our side. Let's help them out being on our side. In Azerbaijan, it's a little different. It's Azerbaijanis. This would be like the Ukraine going attacking their own region for those people. Well, this is an Armenian region that has their own culture. And guess who stepped in to rescue the Armenian region? This was 2 years ago.
Well,
Russia. Right? Because this is their part of the world. They're the big dog in this region. They're pretty much that's their part of the world, Russia.
right.
And Azerbaijan and Armenia and these regions all and Georgia used to be a part of the Soviet Union. They were
Right.
Soviet bloc countries. And then
Right.
when the Soviet Union collapsed, they regained their independence, but there's still animosity there. And it's like this is so much more complicated than the mainstream media can ever explain it, right?
Yeah.
It's way more
That's a great point.
they can't grasp it. Somebody's writing a script for them. We have to pit there's has to be a good and an evil. Right? There's
Yeah.
be a good guy and a bad guy in this, and let's pick Russia because we've been calling Russia the enemy for well since 2016, right? Because before that they weren't calling Russia an enemy. Barack Obama was laughing about it, right? Oh, I want the '80s called and they want their foreign policy back. Remember when he said that?
Yeah.
In that debate,
Yeah.
was it with Mitt Romney? I
Mhm.
think Mitt Romney
Mhm.
was alerting, "Oh, Russia's a problem," and Barack Obama was laughing. Russia, the '80s called, they want their foreign policy back, but now, why? Hey, let's conveniently use Russia as an enemy to make Trump out to be the evil, and so Russia's on people's minds as a
Yeah.
bad guy.
Well, and speaking of that, isn't it funny how recently Trump came out and said, "Hey, I will negotiate the peace between the superpowers." It's like, yo, if he could pull that off, I mean, holy crap. If he could pull that off, that would be freaking amazing, in my opinion.
No war was started under his administration, right? That's the first time in decades. Stop me if you've heard this one before, but
Oh no.
in about 5 or 6 presidencies, he's the first to have not engaged or started a war.
I remember I served under Bush Jr. and Obama. Okay. And I remember during the Russian Georgian conflict, I was deployed to Iraq, and all the Russian aircraft that we had that America contracted to supply cargo, all those flights stopped. So
Hmm.
for a couple weeks, we had no Russian aircraft to work on. Okay. And then the whole Russian Crimea conflict, both happened under Obama. Okay. Then go to 4 years, just four little years under the Orange Man. Nothing. Actual, tangible, credible world peace for the most part.
Peace in the Middle East. Talk about treaties between Israel and Qatar or whatever. Like
And
all these,
Bahrain. Yeah.
it's like
Oh no,
whoa,
no, no, for
things you
sure.
never thought were going to happen were happening.
But no, 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 no. He's bad. He's really, really bad. Okay.
Warmonger.
Okay. So then we vote in the old sweet old grandpa. And all of a sudden, botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. That country is back in the hands of the Taliban. 20 years completely wasted. Now, Russia has done all this with Ukraine. Now, this geopolitical instability. NATO countries are revolting against each other. Italy just voted their first nationalist populist female to lead the country.
She's amazing.
I can keep going. I mean, when you see the people in these European countries fighting back in their own way, it's like, wait a second. There's a lot of stuff happening right now in just 2 years. I thought this was to be the time of the great unification, peace, coming together. Hmm. Not so much.
Yeah, Joe Biden's this nice old man. He's not going to do anything radical and crazy. Are you kidding me? He's not even in control. He has no idea what's going on. He gets up there and says whatever he feels like saying, and within seconds they're rolling it all back. Well, I didn't mean that. Well, he didn't. Like, I don't want to go on a Joe Biden tangent, but here's the bottom line. The bottom line. Is there a bottom line? Uh, the bottom line is there's some really, really, really tough times ahead, right? Extremely. I mean, prices going up. Like normally at this point, gas prices would be creeping down back to where they were before the big hike, and they weren't even able to sustain that. I like gas prices peaked for me at 609 a
Hmm.
gallon. The place I go to is the cheap gas in town. It was a good 10 to 20 cents higher at all the other gas stations at least. But 609 was where it peaked when I fill up my gas tank. And then it went down to 450 something. And then now it's back up to 565. So it's creeping back up right as the election is coming. And so they weren't even able to keep gas prices down very long. They were able to shove it down right after it peaked, but now it's going back up. And we still haven't felt the full repercussions of the energy prices. When energy prices go up, everything goes up
Well, of
and
course.
doesn't come back down. And we still haven't even felt the full effect of the initial spike.
Of
So
course.
we're looking at like the prices going up. Who suffers when prices go up? The poorest of the poor, right?
Yeah.
And one of Jordan Peterson's guests, I don't remember the guy's name. I have to get it for you guys next time. But this guy is so deep into what's going on. He said famine is coming in the fall, which we're right at it. The fall is beginning. Famine is coming in certain parts of the world, the poorest of the poor, and it could get as bad as within a year or so, a billion deaths of starvation and plague. Because when you have starvation, plague comes as well because unsanitary conditions, they can't. The last thing they're trying to do is brush their teeth and wash their hands. They're just trying to find a bite of food to eat and starving, like a bite of food to eat every 3 days. Like that's how bad it gets in the poorest of the poor. and then who doesn't suffer? The rich who don't care about money, right? People have so much money, they couldn't even spend it all if they tried. It doesn't affect them at all. And so their mindset stays the same. It's like, oh, these poor people dying, good, right? In the back of their minds, it's like, oh, well, there's too many people on the planet anyway. There is evil behind this.
Yep.
And so we're going to go through stuff that we've never gone through before. Biggest famine. I mean, we're going to. It's not like maybe. And people don't realize. People are in their little bubbles, watching their entertainment, watching their Netflix, not realizing what is upon us.
Mm-hmm.
But in suffering, the church thrives. Okay, yeah, Mom's going to chime in because there's a whole demographic out there that believes that these things were all prophesied and Jesus is coming and he's going to fix it all. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not what my Bible, right? I mean, the Bible does not teach that Black Hawk helicopters are locusts. Sorry, I just want to. Here's the thing: the Christian church is the only church or the only world religion that thrives in suffering. Every other religion has grown through state sponsorship, right? The Muslim faith is forced upon. It's like enforced. It's not something that grows naturally. It is forced by the governments, right? The heads, because Muslim nations are
That's interesting.
Muslim nations are religious, political, like the religion and the politics are combined into one. They govern through their religion. So the Muslim nation is the growth of Islam is through force. Hinduism is the state religion of India, and Judaism was just the Jewish state. Christianity
Israel,
for 300 years had no state. After the resurrection of Christ, there was no state, and it grew like crazy.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
So in suffering, Christianity thrives. So Christianity is just spreading like crazy right now. We are in the biggest religious, we may not feel it in the West, but we are literally on the globe in the largest religious revival in history. And people don't understand that. So yeah, a lot of suffering, but the good news is people are getting the truth because they see so much evil out there. They recognize evil does exist. That means there must be a God. That is the logical conclusion. So Judaism, how about Judaism? It is a state religion of Israel.
Yeah.
It's the state religion of Israel. And Judaism, on the grand scheme of things, to put it in perspective, I have actually at my church office, there's a book that has world religions and how they've grown over the last 100 years, what their demographics are in total. So anybody associated with Christianity, whether it's Catholic or Protestant, any of those, Armenian, Apostolic, Greek Orthodox, there's 2.4 billion Christians on the planet. Muslim, it's like 1.9 billion Muslims. The Jewish religion, it's like 11 million. Or maybe it's 20 million or 30 million, but it is literally a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. It doesn't even show up on the pie chart. So you've got 2.4 billion Christians is like a big chunk of that pie chart, and then billion Muslims. The Jewish religion is this tiny little sliver. It never grew. And it could be the curse that they called down upon themselves when they said, his blood be upon our hands, when they said, crucify, his blood be upon our hands, the curse be upon us. And they just stayed this tiny little world religion while Christianity went and fulfilled all that the Old Testament was prophesying. Christianity is the fulfillment of prophecy. All right.
Absolutely. And I would say one more thing too. Let's not forget the great schism in the Christian church after Martin Luther. So
the two popes.
You could make the argument that Catholicism, the Vatican City, the micronation, the Catholic side could have a state, but the Protestant side, not so much. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the Vatican City is a micronation, and that is a Catholic nation.
We're out of time. And on that note, good to see you, everyone. It was an engaging conversation.
Absolutely, always is.
All right, you can cut the